The rain fell mercilessly on that dark night, forming water curtains that made it difficult to see beyond a few meters. Under this downpour, a small figure walked with determined steps toward the hospital lights that stood out in the darkness like a beacon of hope. It was Lily, a girl of only 5 years old, completely soaked, with her black hair stuck to her face and her simple clothes transformed into heavy rags by the water. Her small and fragile body trembled uncontrollably, not only from the cold that penetrated her bones, but from the fear that dominated her heart. Her large, dark eyes, normally full of innocence and joy, now carried a concern that no child should know. Her lips, slightly purple from the cold, moved in a repetitive whisper, as if it were a prayer or a mantra. "Mommy can't go to heaven yet. I promised I'd take care of her. I promised." The fluorescent lights of the hospital shone like a distant promise as Lily's approached the main entrance. Her small hands, red and wrinkled from the rain, pushed the heavy glass door with all the strength she could gather. The contrast between the cutting cold of the night and the artificial heat of the hospital interior made her body tremble even more. The characteristic smell of cleaning products and medications invaded her nostrils, causing a slight nausea. Her eyes quickly scanned the environment, absorbing the details of the place. People coughing in the waiting room, hurried nurses carrying clipboards, and the constant sound of electronic devices that she did not understand, but that seemed important. Her heart accelerated when she spotted the reception desk. There was the barrier between her and her mother, between the despair and hope that motivated her to travel the dark and dangerous streets alone to get there. "I'm going to find Mommy. She needs me. The guardian angel brought me here. He won't let me stop now." The receptionist raised her eyes from her computer screen when she noticed the presence of the small, soaked figure approaching the counter. Her face showed first surprise, then concern. She was a middle-aged woman, with tired eyes of someone who had seen much suffering, but who could still be moved. She immediately rose from her chair and went around the counter, kneeling down to be at the child's height. "Little one, what are you doing here alone at this hour? Where are your parents?" The voice was gentle, but carried the authority of someone who needed to maintain order in the place. Lily felt the knot in her throat grow, but gathered all her courage to respond. Her eyes filled with tears that mixed with the raindrops still present on her face. "My mommy is here in the hospital. She's very sick. The neighbor who was taking care of me didn't come home yesterday. I had to come alone. Please let me see my mommy." Her voice was small and trembling, but carried a surprising determination for someone so young. "I'm sorry, dear, but I can't let a child walk alone through the hospital. I need to call the council." "What is your mother's name?" The receptionist returned to her place behind the counter, her face now a mask of compassion mixed with the rigidity of someone who needs to follow protocols. She picked up the phone and began dialing a number while observing the girl out of the corner of her eye. Lily felt panic growing inside her chest like a giant wave. She knew what the council was. The neighborhood children spoke about it with fear. "It's who takes children without parents," she had heard once. No, she couldn't allow that. Her mother needed her now. The neighbor had said that her mother could go to heaven at any moment. She knew what that meant. She had already seen her kitten go to heaven last year after getting very sick. He never came back. She couldn't let that happen to her mother. While the receptionist was talking on the phone with her back to her, Lily saw her opportunity. Her small body slipped to the side, moving silently like a cat, and then, in a desperate impulse, ran toward the corridor that extended beyond the counter. "They won't stop me. Mommy taught me to be strong. She needs me now. I have to find her." The hospital corridors seemed like an endless labyrinth of closed doors and white walls. Lily ran as fast as her little legs would allow, leaving a trail of water on the polished floor. Her heart was beating so hard that it seemed to want to jump out of her chest. She could hear alarmed voices behind her, but that only made her run faster. "Mommy! Mommy!" she shouted as she passed door after door, looking quickly through the small glass windows, searching for the familiar face she loved so much. Patients and staff turned in surprise at hearing the desperate cries of the child. Some seemed scared, others moved, but no one managed to stop her in time. It was as if a greater force propelled her, giving her the speed and agility she normally wouldn't have. Tears now flowed freely down her face, blurring her vision, but she continued running and screaming as if her voice could penetrate all walls and reach her mother, wherever she was in that immense building. "Mommy will hear me. She always says she can hear my heart even from far away. She will answer me, I know she will." Turning into another corridor, Lily collided with something, or rather, someone. The impact made her fall sitting on the cold floor, momentarily disoriented. When she looked up, she saw a young man wearing a white nurse's uniform. It was Matthew, who looked at her with an expression of surprise and confusion. He had gentle brown eyes and dark hair slightly disheveled after a long work shift. His hands held a clipboard that he almost dropped with the impact. For a moment, both stared at each other in silence, the small soaked girl sitting on the floor and the tired nurse standing before her. There was something in the child's gaze that prevented him from immediately reacting with reprimand. It was a look he knew well, the look of someone who was about to lose a loved one. During his years working at the hospital, Matthew had seen that same look hundreds of times, but never in someone so young. Before he could say anything, he heard rapid footsteps approaching and saw 2 hospital security guards running toward them. What's happening here? Who is this child? How did she get in alone? The security guards approached quickly, their heavy breathing revealing the effort of the chase. One of them, a tall, burly man, extended his hand to grab Lily, but Matthew, in an instinctive movement, placed himself between them. "Wait," he said firmly. "Let me talk to her first." He then turned to Lily, who now cowered like a frightened animal, her eyes wide with fear. He knelt down to be at her level, ignoring the moisture that immediately penetrated the fabric of his pants. His voice was soft when he spoke, like someone talking to a bird that might fly away at any moment. "Hello, little one. My name is Matthew. I'm a nurse here. I can help you find who you're looking for, but I need you to calm down first, okay?" Lily hesitated, her eyes alternating between Matthew and the security guards who waited impatiently. Something in the nurse's voice made her trust him. Perhaps it was the kindness, or perhaps it was simply the desperation that made her cling to any hope. "Please, mister, my mommy is very sick. The neighbor said she might go to heaven at any moment. I just want to say goodbye, please help me." Matthew's heart tightened upon hearing the girl's words. He knew well what it meant when they said someone might go to heaven at any moment. It was a euphemism for imminent death, something he faced daily in his work, but which never became easier, especially when it involved children. The security guards seemed impatient, exchanging significant glances between themselves. One of them stepped forward, his deep voice breaking the moment. "We'll have to take her to reception. The social worker is already on her way." Matthew raised a hand, asking for one more moment. Something in that child's determination touched him deeply. He had seen many families shattered by illness and death, but there was a singular courage in that small girl who faced the night and rain alone to see her mother one last time. He decided that, if it was in his power, he would help. "I'll help her. No one deserves to leave this world without a last hug from someone they love. No one." Matthew looked into Lily's eyes with seriousness. "For me to help you, I need to know your mother's name. That way I can check which room she's in." Lily sniffled, trying to contain her tears, and nodded her head. Her voice came out a little stronger this time, as if gathering all her strength for this crucial moment. "My mother is Valerie." She made a small pause as if trying to remember something important, and then completed, "Valerie." Matthew smiled gently, encouraging her. "Valerie what, little one? I need the full name to find her in the system." Lily frowned, concentrating. Her mother had mentioned the other name a few times, usually when they needed to go to the doctor or at school. It was a difficult name to remember, but important. Valerie. Valerie Mason. That's what the teacher calls her when she picks me up at school. Time seemed to freeze for Matthew. The name hit him like a physical blow, reverberating in his ears like an endless echo. Valerie Mason. It couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be. His face, previously compassionate, now rapidly lost color, becoming as white as the uniform he wore. His pupils dilated, and his breathing became shallow and irregular. A strange buzzing began in his ears, muffling all other sounds around him. Images from the past invaded his mind in an uncontrollable whirlwind. Valerie smiling under the sunlight, Valerie crying in his arms after difficult news, Valerie disappearing from his life without explanation about 6 years ago, a week before the wedding that never happened. 6 years. Lily was 5 years old. The math was simple and devastating. No, it can't be. Valerie! Matthew's legs gave way under the weight of the revelation. The world around him began to spin and darken at the edges, like an old photograph slowly burning. He tried to lean against the wall, but his reflexes no longer responded. Lily watched with wide eyes as the face of the man who had seemed so strong moments before now contorted in an expression of absolute shock. The security guards, realizing something was wrong, stepped forward, but it was too late. Matthew's body collapsed on the corridor floor with a dull thud, unconscious, while the clipboard he was holding slid across the polished floor. The last coherent thought he had before darkness took over was a question he never imagined he would ask. Could he be the father of that child? The man fell. Help him! Please, help the man! Lily screamed, genuinely frightened to see the nurse collapse without warning. The security guards rushed to help Matthew, while other hospital staff, attracted by the commotion, began to gather around. Amid the confusion, Lily was momentarily forgotten, a small soaked figure observing the chaos she had inadvertently caused. Her small hands pressed against each other in a nervous gesture, while silent tears continued to stream down her face. She didn't understand why the kind man had fallen that way after hearing her mother's name. Had her mother already gone to heaven, and he didn't know how to tell her? The thought made a sob escape from her lips. One of the security guards, remembering her presence, turned to her with a stern expression, while the other tried to revive Matthew. "Don't move from there, little girl. You've caused enough problems for one night. We'll take you to social services as soon as we resolve this." Lily felt fear growing again in her chest. Social services meant being taken away from her mother. It meant that maybe she would never see her again, nor tell her how much she loved her, nor say goodbye properly. The people around now seemed like hostile giants, with their loud voices and abrupt movements. Without anyone noticing, she began to slowly back away, step by step, moving away from the fallen nurse and the busy security guards. Her heart was beating like a frightened bird's, while her eyes frantically searched for an escape route. She had come so close, she couldn't give up now. Her mother needed her, and now, for some mysterious reason, that kind nurse also seemed to need her. When she felt her back touch the cold wall of the opposite corridor, she made her decision. Taking advantage of everyone being distracted with Matthew, she turned and ran again, this time toward a less illuminated side corridor. "I'll find Mommy by myself. Then I'll come back to help the good man. I promise." An uncomfortable buzzing filled Matthew's ears as the darkness gradually dissipated from his mind. He first felt the discomfort of lying on a rigid surface, then the familiar smell of fresh coffee mixed with the aroma of disinfectant that permeated every inch of the hospital. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking several times to adjust his vision to the fluorescent light that seemed to pierce his skull like needles. The light green walls of the staff room came into focus, as well as the worried face hovering over him. It was Ellen, a nurse who worked the same shift. Her dark eyes showed concern as she held a cup of water in his direction. Matthew tried to sit up, but a sudden dizziness made him close his eyes again, breathing deeply to push away the nausea that threatened to overwhelm him. The events prior to his fainting returned like disconnected flashes. The soaked girl in the corridor, the name she pronounced, the revelation that hit him like lightning. Valerie is alive. And that girl could be my daughter. How did I not notice before? Her eyes are identical to mine. "Matthew, you gave us a huge scare," said Ellen, her voice betraying genuine concern while trying to maintain a professional tone. "I've never seen you faint like that. The security guards had to carry you here. The doctor on duty said it could have been accumulated stress and low blood pressure, but are you sure you're okay?" She placed the glass of water in Matthew's trembling hands, watching him cautiously, like someone evaluating an unstable patient. The staff room was empty except for the two of them, providing a moment of relative calm amid the constant chaos of the hospital. The clock on the wall marked 30 minutes since the incident in the hallway, 30 lost minutes that now seemed like an eternity to Matthew. He sat up completely, ignoring the throbbing pain in his head, and took a sip of water. His throat was dry as paper, and when he spoke, his voice came out hoarse and urgent. "The girl. Where is the girl who was with me in the hallway? I need to find her immediately. It's very important." Ellen frowned, her expression changing from concern to confusion, then to reluctant understanding. Security took her to social services on the first floor. They're waiting for someone from Child Protective Services to come get her. "Matthew, what's going on? Do you know that child?" There was something in Ellen's tone that suggested she already suspected a deeper connection. Working together for years, she knew Matthew well enough to notice when something extraordinary affected him. His face, normally calm and composed even in the most stressful hospital situations, was now contorted by an emotion she rarely saw, a mixture of desperation, hope, and fear. Matthew placed the glass on the nearby table with such force that some water spilled. He ran his hands through his disheveled hair, trying to organize not just his appearance, but mainly his tumultuous thoughts. "Helen, I need to tell you something I've never shared with anyone here at the hospital. That girl spoke a name I haven't heard in 6 years, a name I tried to forget, but never really managed to remove from my heart." Matthew took a deep breath, as if he were about to dive into dark, unknown waters. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed them against each other. That girl, her mother, is the same Valerie who is in the intensive care unit on the 3rd floor. The Valerie who was my fiancée 6 years ago, who disappeared without explanation a week before our wedding. The words came out all at once, as if he feared his courage might fail if he hesitated. Ellen's eyes widened, momentarily speechless at the revelation. She vaguely knew about a past relationship that had left Matthew devastated. It was something older colleagues occasionally mentioned in hallway conversations, but she never imagined the wound would still be so open, or that the past could reappear so dramatically. Matthew continued, his voice gaining urgency. "I spent years looking for her, hired investigators, even traveled to other cities following false leads. Eventually, I had to accept that she had chosen to disappear from my life. And now she was here all along, fighting for her life a few floors away from where I work every day. Matthew, I understand the shock, but you need to think clearly. This situation could complicate your career. Valerie's records don't mention any children, and the girl might be confused or simply mistaken about who her mother is." Ellen tried to maintain a reasonable tone as she placed a hand on Matthew's shoulder, in a gesture meant to be comforting, but which he immediately perceived as an attempt to restrain him. He subtly moved away, determination growing in his chest. "You don't understand," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "Valerie disappeared about 6 years ago. That girl is around 5 years old. The math doesn't lie, Ellen." He paused, letting the implication of his words hang in the air between them. "If Valerie was pregnant when she disappeared, if that girl is our daughter." He couldn't complete the sentence, the enormity of the possibility hitting him again with full force. A daughter he never knew existed. A daughter who probably never knew he existed. The thought was simultaneously wonderful and devastating. Ellen watched the transformation on Matthew's face, understanding finally hitting her. "My God, Matthew, you think you might be her father? This is very serious. You need to be sure before doing anything hasty. A paternity test would take days, maybe weeks." Matthew was already on his feet, ignoring the residual dizziness and the silent protest of his body. His eyes sought the clock on the wall again. More precious minutes had escaped while they talked. "I don't have weeks or even days, Ellen. I need to know everything about Valerie's condition now. We need to prevent them from taking the girl away before I can discover the truth." He moved toward the door with determined steps, the adrenaline apparently overcoming any physical weakness. Ellen followed him, her face a mask of concern and resignation. She knew that determined expression too well to believe she could dissuade him. For a moment, she hesitated between calling someone who could intervene or helping her friend in his seemingly impulsive quest. She opted for the second option, adjusting her steps to his as they exited into the hallway. "If you're really determined to do this, at least let me help. I know the doctor responsible for her case. I can get access to her medical records." The restricted hospital corridor seemed endless as Matthew and Ellen walked quickly, their steps echoing on the linoleum floor. Some nurses and doctors cast curious glances in their direction, but the hospital was in the middle of a shift change, a moment of relative confusion that provided them some invisibility. Ellen used her access card to enter the digital records room, a small cubicle dominated by monitors and the constant hum of servers. Matthew waited outside, his tense posture revealing the internal emotional storm consuming him. Through the small window in the door, he observed Ellen typing quickly, her face illuminated by the bluish light of the screen. After what seemed like an eternity, but was only a few minutes, she came out with a grave expression that made Matthew's heart sink. Her condition is much more serious than I imagined, Matthew. Multiple organ failure due to a rare autoimmune disease that has progressed silently for years. The doctors have given her less than 24 hours to live. The news hit Matthew like a physical blow, causing him to lean against the wall to maintain his balance. 24 hours, less than a day to find answers to questions that had tormented him for 6 years. Less than a day to discover if he had a daughter. Less than a day to save the life of the woman who, despite everything, he had never completely stopped loving. "I need to see her," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I need to talk to her while it's still possible." Ellen sadly shook her head, eyes downcast. "She's in an induced coma, Matthew. The doctors don't expect her to regain consciousness. They're just making the passage more comfortable." The words hung between them like a final sentence, but Matthew refused to accept it. In his years as a nurse, he had seen medical miracles happen, patients who had overcome all prognoses, who had survived when all bets were against them. There has to be something we can do, some experimental treatment, some possibility, however small. I can't just stand by while she dies, not when I've just found her again. The determination in his voice made Ellen look up to face him. There was a gleam of compassion in her gaze, but also a spark of hope that she couldn't completely hide. "There is one thing," she said, hesitantly. According to her records, she urgently needs a specific blood transfusion to stabilize her condition before they can try any other procedure. But she stopped, biting her lip, clearly reluctant to feed hopes that might prove false. Matthew moved closer, his eyes begging her to continue. "But what, Ellen? Please tell me everything." She sighed deeply before continuing. "Her blood has a genetic rarity that makes it almost impossible to find compatible donors. They've already tested the entire hospital blood bank and sent urgent requests to other hospitals in the region. So far, nothing." An idea began to form in Matthew's mind, a possibility so simple that it was almost absurd that no one had considered it yet. What about family members? Close relatives have a higher probability of compatibility, right? Ellen nodded slowly, beginning to understand where he was going. According to her records, her only known relative has already passed away. She didn't list any emergency contacts when she was admitted to the hospital 3 days ago. The silence that followed was loaded with implications that both understood perfectly. If Matthew really was Lily's father, if his blood was compatible enough with Valerie's to have conceived a daughter together, there was a possibility that he could be a donor. And if Lily really was the daughter of both, the probability of compatibility would be even greater. "I need to speak with the physician in charge immediately, and I need to find Lily before they take her away." "Can you understand what's at stake here, Ellen?" Ellen hesitated only a moment before nodding decisively. "The doctor in charge is Gary. He must be in the intensive care unit now, making his night rounds. Go talk to him while I check exactly where the girl is." Matthew briefly squeezed Ellen's arm in a silent gesture of gratitude before quickly heading to the elevator that would take him to the 3rd floor. His heart was racing not only from the physical effort, but from the adrenaline of the moment. Inside the empty elevator, he allowed himself a brief moment of vulnerability, resting his forehead against the cold metal wall while breathing deeply. He felt as if he had been dragged into a feverish dream, one of those nightmares where you run without moving, chasing something that remains eternally out of reach. "Why did you run away, Valerie? What happened to make you disappear like that? And how could you hide my daughter from me all these years?" The elevator doors opened silently on the 3rd floor, revealing the more controlled and quiet environment of the intensive care unit. Here the smell of antiseptic was even stronger, and the lights were purposely kept at a lower level to provide some comfort to the critically ill patients. Matthew knew this part of the hospital well, having worked there during his first years as a nurse. He located Gary talking to a nurse near the central station, his eyes fixed on a clipboard as they discussed the details of some case. Gary was a respected doctor, known for his competence and impeccable ethics, but also for his direct and occasionally abrupt approach. Matthew waited a few steps away until the conversation ended and the nurse walked away, then approached with determined steps. "Gary, I need to talk to you about a patient. Valerie Mason, room 312. Gary looked up from the clipboard, momentary surprise giving way to a frown. "Matthew, I heard you had a fainting spell earlier. You should be resting, not wandering around the hospital." His voice carried a mixture of professional concern and slight irritation. Matthew remained firm, holding the doctor's gaze without hesitation. "I'm fine, and this is important. Valerie Mason. I knew her. We were." He paused, uncertain how to summarize what they had been to each other in a simple word. "We were engaged 6 years ago, before she disappeared." Gary blinked, clearly not expecting this revelation. For a moment, his usual professionalism gave way to a more human expression of surprise. He adjusted his glasses on his nose, buying time to process the information. "I see. That's an extraordinary coincidence. However, it doesn't change her clinical state, which is extremely serious." Matthew stepped forward, lowering his voice to avoid being overheard by other professionals in the hallway. "I know she needs an urgent transfusion. I know about the genetic rarity of her blood. I want to offer myself as a donor for compatibility testing." Gary studied Matthew's face for long seconds, as if trying to assess his motivations and mental state. Finally, he sighed deeply and indicated a small empty consultation room nearby. Once inside, with the door closed, his posture relaxed slightly. "Matthew, I appreciate your offer, really. But I need to be absolutely honest with you. Her condition is terminal. The transfusion could stabilize her temporarily, give her perhaps a few more weeks, but the disease has already caused irreversible damage. The kidneys are failing, the liver is compromised, the heart shows signs of advanced myocarditis. I don't want to give false hope. A few weeks can make all the difference, Gary. And there's more. The girl who was found in the hospital tonight, Lily, she claims to be Valerie's daughter. And if you do the math..." Matthew didn't need to complete the sentence. Gary was intelligent enough to connect the dots. The doctor removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture that Matthew knew indicated profound fatigue or stress. "This complicates things," he finally said. "If there's a child involved, if you suspect you're the father..." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "Even so, I need you to understand the gravity of the situation. Without a compatible donor by tomorrow morning, there's nothing we can do to prevent the inevitable. And even with the transfusion, we're just buying time, not offering a cure." Matthew nodded gravely, accepting the harshness of the medical reality, but refusing to give up hope. "Time is exactly what I need right now, Gary. Time to discover the truth, time to find answers, time for Lily to meet her mother if she really is her daughter. Please." The silence that followed weighed like lead in the small space of the consultation room. Gary finally put his glasses back on and nodded once, an almost imperceptible gesture of agreement. "I'll authorize the compatibility test immediately. If compatible, we can proceed with the transfusion tonight. But Matthew..." His eyes met the nurse's with intensity. "I need you to keep your expectations realistic, for your own mental health." Matthew felt a lump in his throat, but managed to mutter a thank you before leaving the room. In the hallway, his steps were firmer now, driven by a clear purpose. He checked his phone and saw a message from Ellen with the information he was anxiously awaiting. The girl has already been taken. Child Services sent her to the temporary shelter in the East Zone. With no confirmed relative, she'll be transferred to the state orphanage early tomorrow. Shelter address attached. Matthew's heart sank as he read the message. The shelter was on the other side of the city, at least 40 minutes away even without night traffic. And worse, without a confirmed relative, Lily would be sent to the state orphanage the next morning, potentially disappearing into the complex social assistance system. The clock was now running against him on two desperate fronts, saving Valerie and preventing losing Lily forever. As he walked quickly toward the laboratory for the compatibility test, a crystalline certainty formed in his mind. This would be the longest night of his life, a frantic race against a merciless clock that didn't stop for any human tragedy, however heart-wrenching it might be. I'll find them. I'll save them, even if it costs everything I have. This family I never knew. I won't lose it again. Night had swallowed the city as Matthew drove frantically through the almost deserted streets. The compatibility test had confirmed what he already suspected. His blood was compatible with Valerie's, and the transfusion was already underway, buying some precious hours. But that was only half the battle. The other half was inside the grey building that now rose before him, the temporary shelter where Lily had been taken. The clock showed 3:30 in the morning when Matthew finally parked. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. Every minute that passed was 1 minute less to save Valerie, 1 minute less before Lily would be sent away. "I'm coming, Lily. I'm going to get you out of here, and together we'll save your mother." I know it's what she would have done for me, even after everything. The shelter corridor smelled of cheap disinfectant. A middle-aged woman sitting behind a counter looked up when Matthew approached, her expression instantly transforming into distrust. "We don't accept visitors at this hour," she declared, before he could even speak. Matthew took a deep breath, knowing he needed to stay calm. "Good evening, my name is Matthew. I'm a nurse at the Central Hospital, and I'm here regarding Lily, the girl who was brought in earlier by Child Services." He showed his ID, which the supervisor studied with critical eyes before returning it. "Yes, we received the girl. Sad case. But that doesn't explain what you're doing here in the middle of the night." Her medical issues were evaluated upon admission, and there was nothing urgent. "It's not directly about her health, but her mother's," Matthew replied, leaning over the counter. "Lily's mother is dying right now in the hospital. Multiple organ failure. Without a compatible donor, she won't survive until dawn." The supervisor leaned back in her chair, arms crossed in a defensive posture. "Even if that were true, I can't simply hand over a child under my responsibility to a stranger in the middle of the night. I would need a court order or formal authorization from Child Services. Ma'am, please, I'm begging you. A person's life is at stake, and I'm not just any stranger. I have reason to believe I'm Lily's father. Her mother and I were engaged before she disappeared from my life 6 years ago. Lily's age coincides exactly with that period. A convenient story. I'm sure the family court judge will be interested to hear it tomorrow when formal procedures can be followed. Until then, the girl remains in our custody." The coldness of the response hit Matthew like a slap. On impulse, he took his phone from his pocket and showed a photo of himself and Valerie from almost 6 years ago. "And here is the preliminary result of my blood compatibility test, showing that I'm compatible with her. And this is the medical file showing the severity of the case and the urgency of the transfusion." The supervisor examined the evidence, her expression slowly changing. Matthew noticed the small opening and continued, his voice softer. "I know you're just doing your job, but we're facing an extraordinary situation. If I'm right, this might be the only chance for Lily to meet her mother. And if I'm right about the rest, it might be the only chance to save Valerie's life. Please. I'll allow you to speak with the girl, just speak, under my direct supervision. If she confirms she recognizes you from the hospital, I'll consider allowing you to take her for the test, but I'll need official documentation signed by a doctor." Room number 3 was small and Spartan. Under the dim light, Matthew saw Lily huddled on the bed, still dressed in the same clothes, now dry but wrinkled. When the door opened, her eyes lit up as she recognized Matthew. "It's the man from the hospital. The man who fell on the floor," she exclaimed, her small voice echoing in the empty room. Matthew felt his heart tighten. The supervisor was carefully observing the interaction. "Hello, Lily. So you remember me then?" "I'm Matthew, the nurse from the hospital. How are you feeling?" Matthew knelt beside the bed. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. The same eyes he saw in the mirror every morning looked back at him, full of innocence. Lily nodded affirmatively. "Did you get sick like Mommy? Is that why you fell on the floor?" she asked with concern. "No, little one, I was just very surprised when you said your mother's name. She's someone I knew a long time ago." Lily tilted her head to the side, studying him intently. "Did my mommy go to heaven? Is that why you came to get me?" The innocent question hit Matthew like a punch. "No, Lily. Your mother is still in the hospital, fighting hard to get well. He took a deep breath before continuing. Lily, do you know who your father is? Did your mother ever talk about him? The girl lowered her eyes to her own hands, which were nervously clutching the blanket. Then she raised her face again, her eyes now shining with renewed confidence. Mommy said my daddy was an angel who takes care of sick people, but that he didn't know about me because there were a lot of bad people wanting to hurt us. She said that one day, when we didn't have to hide anymore, she would take me to meet him. The word struck Matthew like a revelation. An angel who takes care of sick people, a nurse. He couldn't hold back the solitary tear that ran down his face. Lily, I'm a nurse. I take care of sick people in the hospital. And I knew your mother a long time ago. We were going to get married. He saw the girl's eyes widen with growing understanding. Do you think I could be the angel your mother mentioned? Are you my daddy? Are you Mommy's angel? Is that why you got sick when I said her name, because you missed her? Matthew nodded, unable to find adequate words. I think so, Lily. I think I'm your father. And yes, I was missing your mother very, very much. He glanced at the supervisor, who was watching with a visibly touched expression. Lily, your mother is very sick, but there's a chance to help her, and you can be part of that help. I can help Mommy get better. How? I'll do anything. I promise I'll be brave. Your mother needs a special type of blood. I've already given her some of mine, but it might not be enough. We need to check if your blood also matches hers. If it does, you could help save her, but we would need to go back to the hospital to do a test. It's quick, but it might be a little uncomfortable, like when you get a vaccine. Would you be brave enough to try? I'm not afraid of needles. Mommy always says I'm the bravest girl in the world. Can we go now? Can we go right now? The determination in the child's voice was moving. Matthew looked at the supervisor, whose face showed internal conflict. The documents you mentioned, she finally said. Go get them while I help Lily get ready. Matthew felt a wave of relief. Thank you. I'll get the documents right away. And, Lily, you really are the bravest girl in the world. Mommy will be so happy when she knows I found her angel. She always cries secretly looking at an old photo. I think it's a photo of you. The way back to the hospital was tense, with Matthew driving as fast as possible, while Lily chattered in the back seat under the woman's supervision. When they finally arrived, the clock showed 4:45 in the morning. Matthew guided Lily and the supervisor through the almost empty corridors to the laboratory, where Jason, an old college colleague, was waiting for them. Jason, thank you for doing this. I know I'm asking a lot, but it's literally a matter of life and death. Jason looked surprised at the child, who was observing the laboratory with fascination. Matthew, when you said you needed an urgent favor, I didn't imagine it would involve. Matthew approached, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. I know it's irregular. I know you could lose your job, but this is possibly my daughter, and her mother is dying at this very moment. My God, Matthew, this is complicated. A paternity test would take days, even with maximum priority. And we would need formal authorization. It's not a paternity test I need right now. It's a blood compatibility test. The transfusion of my blood to Valerie is happening, but Gary thinks it won't be enough. Jason ran his hand through his hair, visibly uncomfortable. Do you realize the consequences? If something goes wrong, if someone discovers I collected blood from a minor without formal authorization, the shelter supervisor is here. She's the temporary legal guardian and agreed to the procedure. Jason looked from the supervisor to Matthew, and finally to Lily. He sighed deeply. All right, I'll do the test. But if any complication arises, we stop immediately. Matthew nodded, grateful beyond words. Understood. And Jason, thank you. He turned to Lily, kneeling again. Lily, this is my friend Jason. He's going to do a test to see if your blood can help your mother. It will hurt just a little, like a mosquito bite, but I know you're brave, right? The girl solemnly nodded, extending her arm without hesitation. I'm ready. I want to help Mommy. In a few minutes, Jason had collected the small sample needed. Now I need to analyze the sample. It will take a few hours. Why don't you take the girl to rest a bit? There's a waiting room at the end of the hall. Matthew led Lily and the supervisor to the indicated room. The girl was already showing signs of fatigue, her eyes struggling to stay open. In minutes she was asleep, exhaustion finally winning. Matthew watched her sleep, amazed at the idea that this small person could be part of him. The supervisor sat in a nearby chair. "She looks like you, especially when she smiles. She has the same way of tilting her head." "You think so?" I look at her and see Valerie, the same gestures, the same determination. The supervisor nodded with a small smile. "Children are like that. A little bit of each parent, mixed in ways impossible to predict. You really believe she's your daughter, don't you? It's not just a story to get what you want. I believe it with every fiber of my being. And even if by some cruel miracle of fate she isn't, I would still do everything in my power to help her and her mother." Hours passed in a haze of anxiety and hope. Finally, Jason appeared at the waiting room door. "Matthew, we have the results. You need to come see this." In the laboratory, Jason took him to a monitor full of graphs and numbers. Matthew understood enough to comprehend the basics. Her blood is compatible with Valerie's. In fact, it's almost a perfect match in all critical markers, and there's more. Jason pointed to a specific section of the results. "I did a quick comparison with your blood sample. Matthew, the probability of you being this child's father is extremely high." The words confirmed what Matthew's heart already knew, but the scientific validation hit him hard. "She is my daughter. My daughter. All these years lost, Jason. I know it's a shock, but there's still time. Now, regarding the compatibility for transfusion, there's good and bad news. Her blood is definitely compatible and contains the same rare factors as Valerie's. However, due to Lily's age and size, the amount of blood that could be safely extracted would be minimal. Probably not enough to make the difference Valerie needs. There has to be a solution. Some way to use Lily's blood in combination with mine, perhaps." Jason scratched his chin, thoughtful. "Theoretically, yes, we could try a combined approach, but it would be experimental, risky. And honestly, Matthew, even if it worked, the procedure could put Lily's own life at risk. Children that age simply don't have enough blood reserves for significant donations." "You're talking about using a 5-year-old child's blood for an experimental transfusion? This is completely unacceptable." The authoritative voice that cut through the conversation made both men turn abruptly. Standing at the laboratory door was Catherine, the hospital director, her face a mask of contained fury. Beside her, a security guard and a nurse. Catherine advanced into the laboratory, her eyes registering the evidence of what they were doing. "Matthew, what's happening here is simply unbelievable. You brought a minor child to the hospital in the middle of the night without formal parental authorization to collect blood. This violates practically every ethical and legal protocol that exists. Director, I can explain. The girl is possibly my daughter, and her mother is dying on the 3rd floor right now. We have the shelter supervisor here. She authorized the procedure as temporary guardian." Catherine raised a hand, silencing him. "Even with this supposed supervisor, what you're considering doing is using a small child's blood for an unapproved experimental procedure. As a physician and director of this hospital, I cannot allow that. Please, Catherine. We're talking about Valerie's only chance. Jason just confirmed that Lily is compatible, and there are strong indicators that she really is my daughter. That doesn't change the fact that what you're proposing is dangerous and unethical. I'm suspending you immediately, Matthew. And if anything happens to this child, you will be held criminally responsible. Child Protective Services has already been notified and is on their way to get her. I'm sorry about Valerie's situation, truly. But I cannot allow a child to be put at risk, regardless of the circumstances. What if there's an alternative procedure, something that uses only a minimal amount of Lily's blood, completely safe for her? The desperation in Matthew's voice was palpable, touching even the inflexible Catherine. She hesitated, her gaze meeting Jason's. Would that be possible? Jason straightened up, regaining some of his professional confidence. Theoretically, yes. There is a technique that utilizes a minimal amount to isolate specific factors. It would be safe for the child and potentially beneficial for the patient, but we would need approval from the ethics committee, which would take weeks, Matthew completed, hopelessness tinging his voice. Weeks that Valerie doesn't have. A heavy silence fell over the laboratory, broken only by the distant sound of medical equipment and the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows of the meeting room, where Matthew remained standing before the hospital's ethics committee. His clothes were wrinkled, his face marked by the fatigue of a sleepless night, but his eyes shone with a fierce determination that no physical exhaustion could erase. Around the oval table, 5 serious faces studied him, Director Catherine in the center, flanked by Gary and 3 other administration members. On the table, spread like cards in a decisive game, were the test results and documents that Matthew had gathered in the last frantic hours. His voice, hoarse from arguing, echoed in the silent room as he pointed to the papers with trembling fingers. The hours passed. On the 3rd floor, Valerie fought against time, and somewhere in the hospital, Lily waited under the watchful supervision of the shelter woman. Matthew knew this was his last chance, the final speech of a man with everything to lose. "Look at these genetic markers, please. The results are indisputable. The compatibility between my blood, Lily's and Valerie's is not coincidence. We are a family I never had the chance to know, to love, to protect. I'm begging not just as a doctor to doctors, but as a father, as a man who has just discovered he has a daughter whose mother may die before they can even say goodbye properly." Director Catherine adjusted her glasses, examining the results once more, her expression oscillating between professional rigor and growing compassion. "I understand your situation, Matthew, and believe me, no one in this room is insensitive to what you're going through, but there are protocols, laws, ethical standards that we cannot simply ignore because the situation is emotionally complex. The proposal to use blood from a 5-year-old child, even in minimal quantities for an experimental procedure." She paused, searching for the right words. "There's a reason why such procedures are submitted to months of approval and ethical review. Any error could result not only in devastating legal repercussions for this hospital, but more importantly, in irreparable harm to the child." Gary, who had been silent until then, leaned forward, adjusting his tie as he did when particularly tense. "Perhaps there is an intermediate solution. Jason mentioned the possibility of a combined donation, an approach that would use safe amounts of blood from both Matthew and Lily, maximizing the presence of rare factors without putting the child at significant risk." The yellowish light in the room seemed to intensify as the debate continued, voices occasionally rising when particularly controversial points were discussed. Matthew remained firm, countering each objection with the precision of someone fighting not only with medical knowledge, but with the desperation of a heart newly awakened to a reality he had never imagined. Hours passed, precious, irreparable hours during which Matthew felt Valerie's life slipping through his fingers like fine sand. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Catherine removed her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. The silence that followed was almost tangible, heavy with the importance of the imminent decision. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of final authority. "After carefully considering all aspects of this exceptional case, the committee has reached a decision. We will allow the procedure proposed by Gary, a combined donation using safe amounts of blood from both Matthew and Lily. The shelter supervisor has signed a temporary authorization as the child's legal guardian, and the genetic results presented are convincing enough to justify this extraordinary exception to our usual protocols." Matthew felt his knees weaken, and he had to lean on the table to avoid falling. The relief that flooded him was so intense that for a moment he feared he might faint again. "Thank you," he managed to mutter, his voice choked with emotion. "I promise you will never regret this decision." Catherine stood up, signaling the end of the meeting, but her gaze remained fixed on Matthew for a moment longer, a silent warning that he understood perfectly. There was no margin for error now. Not when 3 lives hung in the delicate balance that the committee had just authorized. "We are not doing this just for you, Matthew, or even for Valerie. We are doing this for the child, so she has the opportunity to know her mother. Don't waste this chance. And remember, if at any point the procedure presents the slightest risk to Lily, it will be immediately stopped. This is a non-negotiable condition." The hospital laboratory transformed into a center of concentrated activity as Jason coordinated the medical team hastily assembled for the unconventional procedure. Lily sat in a specially adapted chair for children, her little feet dangling in the air, watching with curiosity the adults moving quickly around her. Matthew, in a chair beside her, extended his arm while a nurse prepared the needle for collection. The shelter supervisor remained in a corner, her expression oscillating between concern and hope. Gary supervised everything with the meticulous attention that was his trademark, checking each detail twice before giving his approval. The procedure had been explained to Lily in simple terms. A little bit of her blood mixed with Matthew's would be like a magic medicine for her mother. It wasn't a lie, just a version that a 5-year-old could understand. When the needle finally pierced her small skin, Lily didn't even blink, maintaining the courage she had promised to demonstrate. "You are the bravest girl I've ever met, Lily," said Matthew, his own arm already connected to the collection equipment. "Your mother would be very proud of you now. I am very proud of you. I always knew I had an emptiness inside me, but I never imagined that this emptiness had the exact shape of a brave little girl." While the process of separation and combination of blood components proceeded in specialized equipment, Matthew received a call on his cell phone. It was Edward, the private investigator he had hired years ago, when Valerie disappeared without explanation. For the first time in 6 years, Edward had concrete information. Speaking softly so that Lily wouldn't hear, Matthew listened to the revelation that finally explained the mystery that had destroyed his life. Valerie, then executive secretary to a powerful businessman, had accidentally discovered documents that proved her boss's involvement in a massive corruption scheme. Becoming unwittingly a key witness, she had been threatened when she refused to remain silent. Days before her planned marriage to Matthew, she discovered she was pregnant and made the devastating decision to disappear to protect not only herself, but the baby she carried and the man she loved. For 6 years she lived in hiding, constantly changing cities, working in temporary jobs that didn't require much documentation. The businessman had finally been arrested a few months ago for unrelated crimes. Only then did Valerie feel safe to return to the city, finally planning to reveal herself to Matthew. But the disease that had been silently consuming her body for years finally brought her down, bringing her unconscious to the same hospital where, ironically, Matthew worked. So that was it. All this time, she was trying to protect us. She sacrificed everything. Our life together, my chance to see my daughter grow up, her own happiness, because she believed it was the only way to keep us safe. How can I be angry at someone capable of so much love, of so much sacrifice? While the blood was being processed, Matthew tried to explain to Lily in the simplest words possible why they had lived apart for so long, how her mother had been very brave, protecting them from bad people, how sometimes the greatest act of love is giving up your own happiness to ensure the safety of those you love. Lily listened with the focused attention that only children can demonstrate when something truly interests them, her big eyes absorbing every word. When he finished, she remained silent for a moment, processing the information in her own way. "So Mum is like a secret superhero, who fights against villains but can't tell anyone about her powers, because then the villains would hurt the people she loves." The innocence of the analogy made Matthew smile through tears. "Yes, Lily, that's exactly it. Your mother is the bravest superhero that ever existed." The collection finished and Jason announced that the processing and matching procedure had been successful. The special medicine, as Lily called it, was ready to be administered to Valerie. Gary, who had monitored the entire process, prepared to personally take the precious liquid to the intensive care unit, where Valerie continued fighting for her life. Matthew stood up, determined to be present when the transfusion occurred. "I want to go too. I want to see when the magic medicine makes Mom get better. Can I go, please? I promise to be very quiet." Intensive care unit, a place where life and death dance their eternal ballet, separated only by the thickness of a thread. Matthew had worked in that environment for years, becoming almost insensitive to the mechanical sounds of life support equipment, the characteristic smell of antiseptics, the controlled lighting that created an almost unreal atmosphere. But now, walking down the corridor with Lily holding his hand, everything seemed different, intensified. Each detail registered in his consciousness with painful sharpness. The sound of his own steps on the polished floor, Lily's soft breathing beside him, the almost imperceptible weight of the small hand in his. Gary walked ahead, carrying what could be Valerie's last hope. The shelter supervisor had remained in the waiting room, intuitively understanding that this was a moment Matthew and Lily needed to experience alone. As they approached the room where Valerie was, Matthew felt Lily squeeze his hand harder, as if gathering courage for what would come next. "Remember, Lily, your mother is sleeping a very deep sleep now. She can't wake up, but she might be able to feel that we're here. She might be able to hear your voice if you talk to her. Do you want to talk to her when we go in?" Inside the room, Matthew watched Gary administer the precious fluid into the system connected to Valerie. Lily remained beside Matthew, her eyes fixed on the motionless figure on the bed. Her mother connected to tubes and machines, looking strangely fragile. Matthew felt a tightness in his heart as he recognized, after 6 years, the face of the woman he had loved. Encouraged by Matthew, Lily approached the bed, timidly touching her mother's hand. "Mommy, it's me, Lily. I brought a magic medicine to make you better. And guess what? I found the angel you told me about. Now we can be a real family just like you always promised. But you need to wake up." The following hours were a torture of waiting and hope. Matthew and Lily remained by Valerie's side, watching every monitor, looking for signs of improvement. Gary came in and out regularly, while the nurses moved silently, exchanging glances that Matthew only partially interpreted. Afternoon turned into night, and then into another day. Matthew lost count of how many times Gary came in, checked the monitors and left, until finally, on the afternoon of the second day, he entered with a different expression, grave and solemn. "Matthew, Lily, I need to speak with you outside. There are developments we need to discuss." Matthew's heart seemed to freeze in his chest. He knew that expression, that tone. It was how doctors spoke when the news was too bad to be delivered point blank. Lily must have felt his tension because she squeezed his hand harder as they walked into the corridor. Outside, Gary maintained the dejected expression he had adopted upon entering the room, his eyes avoiding direct contact with Matthew's, fixing on an indeterminate point over his shoulder. A knot formed in Matthew's throat, preventing him from speaking. It wasn't necessary. His questioning look said everything. Gary finally found his voice, although he seemed to struggle with each word. "We did everything humanly possible. We used every available resource, every known technique. We monitored every parameter, every reaction." Matthew felt his legs weaken. They had lost the battle. After everything, the reunion, discovering Lily, the risks taken, it hadn't been enough. The fate that had separated them almost 6 years ago was now completing its work, robbing Valerie of the chance to see her daughter grow up. He felt Lily release his hand and feared she might collapse. But to his surprise, the little girl took his face between her small hands, forcing him to look at her. Her eyes were moist but determined. "Don't cry. Mommy taught me that good people always meet again, even if it's in heaven. She'll be fine there, and one day we'll see her again. Now it's just the two of us, and I'll take care of you." The wisdom of these words broke something inside Matthew. He knelt down and hugged his daughter, tears flowing freely down his face. Gary, who was observing the scene, cleared his throat to get their attention. When Matthew looked up, he noticed something different in the doctor's face, a gleam in his eyes and a slight tremor at the corners of his mouth. Something inexplicable happened. The transfusion worked beyond expectations. "She's responding to the treatment. Her vital signs are stabilizing. I can't guarantee anything yet, but it seems we have reason to hope." A week passed, 7 days of steady though slow progress. Matthew divided his time between the hospital and the bureaucratic process to formally establish his paternity, obtaining temporary custody of Lily with the surprisingly enthusiastic help of the shelter supervisor. Each small improvement in Valerie's condition was celebrated as a monumental victory. Each number that normalized on the monitors, each bodily function that resumed its natural rhythm, each indicator pointing to gradual recovery were reasons to renew hope. Lily, who had adapted with impressive ease to the new reality, became a constant presence at the hospital, decorating Valerie's room with colorful drawings, animatedly talking to her unconscious mother about everything that had happened, about the angel she had found, about plans for when they could all finally go home together. Matthew watched, amazed at the childlike resilience, at Lily's ability to find joy even in the most adverse circumstances. And then, on a particularly sunny morning, When Matthew had briefly stepped out to get coffee, it happened. Valerie opened her eyes. "Mommy! Mommy, you're awake! Daddy! Daddy! Come quick!" Mommy opened her eyes. "She's looking at me." Matthew ran back to the room and found Lily dancing with joy beside the bed, while Valerie looked at her daughter, with eyes full of tears. Upon seeing Matthew, her eyes widened in recognition, mixing fear, guilt, shame, and love in a complex expression. For a moment, no one spoke. Time seemed to freeze as they stared at each other for the first time in 6 years, with Lily between them. "Matthew, I always wanted to tell you, but I was so afraid. They threatened you, threatened the baby. I thought the only way to protect you both was to disappear." The following days were filled with intense emotions and necessary conversations. Valerie told the whole story, explaining her choices and asking for forgiveness. Matthew alternated between anger over lost time and moments of understanding and forgiveness. Lily became the bridge reconnecting them, reminding them of the family they could be. Valerie's recovery surprised the doctors. "Medical miracles happen," Gary commented, "especially when there's so much love involved." 3 weeks later, on the day of her medical discharge, Matthew entered the room with new clothes for the occasion. "Are you ready to go home? Our apartment isn't big, but I've prepared the guest room for you both, while we decide what comes next." Valerie smiled shyly but full of hope. "We're ready," she replied, her voice almost recovered. "And, Matthew, thank you for saving my life, for taking care of our daughter, for giving us a second chance." Matthew sat beside her, his eyes fixed on hers. 6 years of separation, unanswered questions, interrupted dreams. All of this now seemed like a distant past that could be transformed into a foundation for something new. The fear is over. We're safe now. And the rest we can figure out together, one day at a time. Lily approached silently and observed her parents sitting side by side. With the simplicity that only a child possesses, she climbed onto the bed and sat between them, joining their hands over her own lap. With her other hand, she wiped away a tear that was running down her mother's face. "See, Mommy, I found our angel. Now we can be happy forever." And so a family separated by fear for 6 years now found themselves united by love and the miracle of life. The future was uncertain, but at that moment there was one certainty. Together they would transform the tragedy of the past into the blessing of the present, a present that Lily had already perfectly understood. The angel had been found, the family was complete, and love had proven to be stronger than fear. If the story of Lily, Matthew, and Valerie moved you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment where you're from. And don't go anywhere. The next story is already appearing on the screen, made especially for you. See you soon.